Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. Welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today we are going to be reviewing 10 eyeshadow palettes that I recently tried. This is an ongoing series on my channel. I've done loads of these before, but I'm changing the format just a little bit for those of you who have been watching these videos for a while. So let me just get cracking because I've got 10 palettes for you to review. Welcome if you're new here, welcome if you're a returning visitor. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I am a channel who loves to chat about eyeshadow palettes, so this is nothing new. And as I said, I'm changing up the format just a little bit because I was finding myself just completely overwhelmed, not only by new makeup releases, but also with the way I was approaching these kind of videos. So what I'm going to be doing in 2022 with these videos is that once I've tried 10 palettes, sometimes those 10 palettes can all be by the same brand from now on, I'm just going to post this kind of video. Before, I wanted to try all of the palettes that I had bought from a given brand, but that meant that there were very often many more palettes in the video than just 10, which means, you know, the videos became very long. And because I like to show you like photos of like swatches that I took and also some of the makeup looks that I did, the videos just really became a chore to make as well. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to limit myself to really actually 10 palettes, and I'm just going to do these videos a little bit more often then, and just do them every single time I've tried 10 palettes. Now, today's video is going to focus very heavily on a lot of the rosy and mauve tone palettes that I tried out for my rosy and mauve toned eyeshadow palette ranking. A couple of interesting things came out at the end of 2021. And then I wanted to make sure I could include those. Plus I bought a couple of things specifically to try out for that video. So there's a lot of like similar color stories in today's video, which is then the way it's gonna go moving forward. It's not going to be as varied as before. If you don't love eyeshadow palettes, but you're also interested in other content, I also love trying out Essence and Catrice makeup. And I also really like getting the use out of my makeup collection as well. So I do shop my stashes and overview videos. I don't really see myself as a review channel per se, which is why the palettes I have for you today, some of these are really old. Some of these you may have never heard of before. Some of these things have been out for months or years, and I've only now tried them. So a 10 palette review video, not with the newest of the new, because that's not what this channel is about, but with some recent palettes that I tried to let you know how I feel about them. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, 10 palettes here today. I'm just going to grab the first one. And the first two palettes I actually want to chat about, I can chat about in tandem because they're both by the same brand. They are by a British indie brand called Eunique Beauty. And I think that in terms of what I've got going on in today's selection, these are definitely more unique. Though the spelling, if you're looking for the brand online, it's EU and then Nique instead of just a U. So there is a spelling difference there. And these are from the same collection. This is the Bubble Time and the Pamper Me palette. Let me talk about the Pamper Time first because that's the one I tried first. And this one very, very much surprised me. This was the color story of the two that I was the least sure of that I would like. So that's why, you know, we've got a taupey shade and we've got this pinky coral, and I was like, how's that gonna go together? Because those are the only two mattes really that you get. We do have a shade here, though it's just like a navy blue with sparkle, so I was hoping that could behave as a matte, and it did. What this palette is, like, if you want to try this brand, you're gonna want to try it because they do really outstanding shimmers, though. The mattes are really lovely, they are easy to blend, they are very pigmented. A little too intense perhaps if you're a beginner in makeup, but the shimmers is where it's at. In this palette particularly, this shade here and also this shade down here, they're all like duochromy, very flippy shades that are really fun to play around with. And this, in the end, turned out to be very interesting in terms of a look because you can make this quite neutral, but then you have the navy and the purple to really amp it up and then the pink to blend it out. So even though this is only 6 shades, I felt that you could do many different looks with this. I've only done the one look trying out all of the shades. That's something you should know as well about me. When I try a palette, I have tried every single shade at least once. Yeah, every single shade has been tried in all of these palettes that I'm showing you today. So this just has some really unique, great shades. They're not too expensive. I think these retail for around the €18 mark each. So it's not too bad, especially not if you get these kind of interesting shades, I find. Plus they're from the UK, so it's not as difficult to buy if you're in Europe as some of the US indie brands for sure. So the Pamper Me palette from Unique Beauty is one that greatly surprised me. And then I also have the Bubble Time from the same brand. And this one I kind of knew going into it that I'll probably love it. This is their blue-green palette. So it's far more colorful than the other one. Again, 3 mattes, 3 shimmers. And again, even though this is like blues with greens, there's more that you can do here because especially these two darker shades, the darker mattes are a little murky. This is the only thing that's overly bright. So you can pull this in if you want to make the look a little brighter, if you want a bright springy look. Like these two together with this shimmer all over the lid is going to be stunning. But you can make it a little bit more grungy if you'd wanted to. If you pull in this like gold flippy shade, or also if you pull this shade in with this shade, you get something really vibrant and poppy. So again, for the just 6 shades, there are a lot of options here that I can see making it work. And that shade in the bottom is just, it's really, really, really stunning. These didn't really crease on me. It wasn't like they stayed put quite well, but I did have some issues with this transferring at my lower lash line area. Like they have a very creamy texture, and especially the shimmers in these palettes I felt transferred a little bit. They kind of like bleed down, so you do want to perhaps keep some Q-tips on hand so you can sort of swipe that away throughout the day, because as like, you know, your waterline, your lower lash line is always a little bit wet, and I felt it kind of caused my shadow to transfer because of that. So yeah, those were the 2 Unique Beauty palettes. So we'll stick to the small stuff first. The third palette I want to chat about is the Urban Decay Naked 3 Mini. Now, Urban Decay has announced, not officially in any sort of thing, but I have been told that the brand is being pulled from the EU market. So the brand is currently on sale at lots of retailers, and they are disappearing altogether from Europe, continental Europe for sure. I'm not sure about the UK. I hope, fingers crossed, they're gonna stay available from UK retailers, because I love Urban Decay as a brand. So that's why I did have to go already online to find this, because I bought it off of Cult Beauty, because I couldn't find this anywhere after it was announced. And I was like, if I'm gonna do a rosy mauve toned eyeshadow palette ranking, this has to be included. So I hunted this down, bought it, and I really, really loved it. The Urban Decay Naked 3, the large version of this palette, is one of my all-time favorite palettes for sure. So I was so happy that they finally released a mini version of it. Because they released a mini of the Naked 1 and the Naked 2. Those were matte shades that would complement those palettes. Whereas with this one, they've included more shimmer. So it's not an all matte palette. You get 3 mattes, 2 shimmers, and this first shade is more of like a satin. That first shade I feel a little undecided about. Plus, unless you are a snow angel like me, you're not gonna like this. This is perfect if you have fair skin and a cool undertone. I would not recommend this palette to anybody else though, because it's not very deep, save for this one shade. Like if you take this out, like, do you see how bland this looks? But I like bland shadows, okay? I love my shadows to be quite bland for a everyday look. Like this, foolproof. If you work in a professional environment where you can't wear a lot of makeup, I keep saying this. Like, I know that in the online review community, so many people want kapow pigment, but if you are someone who wears makeup in their day-to-day life, who doesn't work in a creative industry where you can get away with wearing a lot of makeup, I mean, I'm a teacher, but I wear something like that with like the blues to work. I will. People get used to it. They won't complain, but there are professions where there are just stricter rules when it comes to what you wear, whether you like that or not. And this is just then something that I think a lot of people might like if they want to get away with it. This is blendable, easy, buildable. If you're someone who's busy, if you have kids and you don't have a lot of time to sit and blend for hours with these very pigmented shades, this is filled with one and done shadows. If you just want to like pop a fluffy brush into this shade, dust it all over the lid, take this shade with your finger and pop it on, you've got a look. Maybe add this for liner if you want a little bit more definition, and you're good to go. So I like Urban Decay especially for that reason, because their shadows are very wearable, easy, everyday shades that if you're a beginner with makeup and you don't know how to blend shadows, these kind of blend themselves, and it's a very wearable look every single time. You can never go overboard. This is what you need. So Urban Decay Naked 3 Mini, I like it. If you like cool tone mauves, this is going to be your jam. Then next up, I think, is this the most disappointing palette I tried? I think in this section, like, I don't do these as rankings because I feel that a ranking of just 10 random palettes I tried is not gonna, like, I'm gonna say something, this was my favorite palette out of this roundup, but if I didn't like any of it, that number one is going to be meaningless. And the same thing, if I've only tried palettes that I truly liked, which is very much the case in today's roundup, then something like this is just going to stand out like a sore thumb. Not that I don't like this, but the Tartelette Juicy sadly wasn't what I had expected from it. I saw this announced and thought that it was going to be far more cool toned than it actually is. I thought this was going to be similar to the In Bloom, where we get rose with different undertones, which is what the In Bloom very much has. That has cool tones, neutrals, and warm tones, but nothing is like pulling overly warm or overly cool, so a lot of people can get away with it. Whereas this, the only row I really enjoyed was the bottom row. That was the one that I truly enjoyed. The pinks surprised me, because what I did when I tried this out is that I did a look with every single row. That's how I like to use my Tartelette palettes, because they just kind of spell it out for you. These are really great beginner-friendly layouts that I think that if you don't know what to do with a palette, this spells it out for you. You really don't have to think about it. But with this one, that middle row just completely threw me off. It's the gold and the peach just didn't really work for me. I think this brown can still be lovely. And as I mentioned, the pinks did surprise me with how good that look came out. It wasn't, whereas, you know, some pink looks, especially if it's overly warm on me, it just looks very sickly and it can really give me pink eye, like I've got an eye infection. This didn't do that, but it still wasn't my favorite, because if I were to go back to this palette, I would just stick to the bottom row, and that's pretty much like, what, 2 creams and 2 browns? Because that's the only thing I really felt worked for me. I mean, I can pull in this matte pink if I want to make this a bit more pink, and then this shimmer, for instance, on the lower lash line could be pretty. But I just felt it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Like, the quality of this is really nice. It's very comparable to the 2 other Tartelette palettes that I have. It's got the same quality. It's just the color story of this wasn't perfect for my skin tone. However, now that I own 3 of these palettes, of course I cannot break up the collection. So I think this is going to stay around for a while. I definitely want to go back to this. I think I can pull some other good looks out of it, but I just felt that middle row just kind of threw me for a loop, and it was far too warm toned. And for me, the palette would have been much better if we would have gotten like some other undertones in here to really round it out, because right now, unless you have a very warm undertone yourself, this is not gonna look good. Next up, we have a palette that I had been on the sort of fence about, like, should I buy this, should I not? But then I decided to do my ranking video, and I was like, no, for that video I'm going to buy it. The reason why I was torn is because the Melt Cheese in Parties was already in my collection because I own the stack. But then I think at the end of 2020, I kind of decided that in 2021, I was just gonna have to buy this because so many people were raving about this being like the best Melt palette. Is this one of my favorite Melt palettes? Yes and no. I like it because it has the best quality for sure, but I don't think it's Melt's most exciting color story. That still goes to the Myrte. I'm sorry, you can't buy that anymore, but the Myrte has the good formula and it's got a unique color story. Whereas with this, I'm like, but in terms of like warmer mauves and also deeper mauves, I think this is a really good pick, which is why it ended up really high in my ranking. And what I liked about this as well is that it does round out the stack for me, because in the stack, what I have always felt it was quite dark, and every look I created with it just looked like a black eye, you could say, like it was punched in the face, because it was very deep and smoky, and I don't always want a smoky look, whereas this does give you some lighter shades that will help you blend it out if you have fair skin like me. You still get you still get the depth that you need to really make the palette work. Plus the shades that they've added, which is this, I never know. I believe it's Sleepwalk, this shimmer, so these two deeper shimmers, and then these two shades, they are all more cool tone leaning. So for me, the palette is far more versatile and wearable than the stack ever was. So I'm going to get rid of the stack, and this is what's going to stay in my collection for sure. Great quality, great color stories. This is, I think, going to work for many different people. With the Urban Decay, I feel you have to like a certain look for it to work, whereas this, I think, is more universally flattering. However, if you're a beginner and you're not used to very pigmented shades, use a light hand, use fluffy brushes, tap off your brush so you don't make a mess, because these do create a bit of fallout. And then we get to the palette that is currently on my face. I actually filmed another video today, so I'm wearing something very neutral because I was going to do a lipstick video today as well, so I already filmed that before I sat down to film this part of the video. So the Urban Decay Naked Cyber, I finally finished using this. I bought this because the Urban Decay Naked family is actually like one of my favorite thing. Like, I collect these, which is why I hope I can still keep buying from Urban Decay even though they are no longer available here, because I do want to sort of keep my Naked palette family intact if that's possible. If they ever come out with more, I will blind buy these and just have fun with it. The Naked Cyber, everybody hated on because a lot of people in the review community test indie shadows, and indie is where it's at if you want to have punchy duochromes and multichromes. This palette is not it. If you are looking for really intense multichromes, I would still recommend buying singles from indie brands because you will just find better options. This palette sort of tried to do wearable duochromes. I think that this is very pretty, and I was able to pull some very stunning looks out of it, but like with the Urban Decay Naked Mini 3, you have to bear in mind that Urban Decay's formula is aimed at people who are regular consumers who A, may not be very experienced makeup users, and 2, who want to have a little bit of fun trying something, but that just don't work or live their lives in a very creative, very makeup heavy environment. If you are that and you want to try a duochrome that isn't going to make people look like, wait, what? Do you have multiple colors on your eyes? Like, if that's you, this is going to be very pretty, because especially like these two shades and also like these two over here, they are shifty shades, but the shift isn't overly strong that it's going to look like you've got a full kaleidoscope of color on your eyes. These are all very wearable, easy to use. The only shades that kind of disappointed me, like this peachy shade in the middle, I didn't really like, but I did really like these four. And where I thought I was going to greatly dislike this brighter orange at the end, I felt it actually goes pretty well with this shade over here and also with these sort of peachy tones that you get over here. So there are shades here that work really well, but these aren't the kind of flips that you'll find in a Cliona stained glass. That's not what this palette is intending to do. Like, if you just look at how soft focused the colors look in the packaging, that's what they were going for. It's soft focus, it's wearable, it's easygoing, pretty makeup, but not necessarily something that a lot of people like, but I liked it. I mean, I think that this look, like, you can go to work with this and it will look really pretty and nobody's going to like question what you've done with your makeup. So that's why the Naked Cyber, I can see why people don't like this, but I personally did really like the looks I came out with. Is this going to be my everyday palette? No, because I have some of those intense multi-chromes. So if I want to go for that sort of look, I'd reach for those over this. But it rounds out my Naked palette collection. And I think for an addition to the Naked palette line, I think this was better than something like the Naked Wild West that they came out with before. So this is far more naked than any of the other releases they've done in recent years. So I like it. Something that I tried that I was like, again, like the Tartelette Juicy, this went in the bottom part of my ranking when I ranked all of my rosy mauve tone palettes, and that's the Zoeva Together We Shine palette. And I kind of should have known that before going into it. However, I kind of bought this as well because Zoeva did away with their entire eyeshadow palette line that they did previously, and they've come out with just 2 palettes for right now, and their aim now seems to be more sustainable and like more for everyone here, very neutral, very minimal sort of makeup. So they've definitely sort of rebranded. And this palette was, I think, the first one they came out with in their rebrand. I still have to try the other one. That's going to come up in one of these other videos for sure. And this I thought, like, ooh, it's rosy tones. I think I'm going to love it because I love my Zoeva palettes. Quality-wise, nothing wrong with it. But it only has 3 shimmers, and I prefer shimmers over mattes. And the shimmers in here, they're a little lackluster. And when I tried this, it was also very, very warm toned. You get some things that are a little bit cool over here in this section, but everything else is quite warm toned, and it's also quite, dare I say it, bland. Like this part of the palette, just, it's like 6 shades, 6 variations of the same shade essentially. So I felt that this palette could do more. Like if this was deeper, it would have worked better. This is quite orange, so I didn't love that. These 2 shades are pretty much superfluous if we also have these 2 shades. So for me, it wasn't as successful as I'd want it to be. Is it lovely quality? Do I like this? But I don't think I'm going to keep it around for very long in my collection. It was pretty, but it's just not something I'm ever going to reach for ever again, I think. Unless, you know, unlike the Tartelette Juicy, I feel that this just wasn't for me. I like the quality, just fine, nothing wrong with it. But I felt that in the end, the looks I did with this were just not really my jam. So another palette that was a bit of a disappointment to me was the Pat McGrath Labs Divine Rose #1. I bought this after trying Divine Rose 2, which I really enjoyed, but I was like, I think this color story may be much better for my complexion. So that's why I did end up buying this. And I ended up buying it on sale because Pat McGrath is just far, far too expensive to buy full price. And I tried it and I like it, but for how expensive this is, I just want it more. And I get a little bit more from the Divine Rose 2. It's a bit more unique in my collection. I feel that the looks that I did with this are looks that I could have done with other palettes I already owned before this. So this definitely wasn't a must-have, which is why I ended up ranking it somewhere like the mid-tier of my eyeshadow palette ranking when I ranked all of my rosy and mauve toned eyeshadow palettes. And the main reason why I don't love this to the moon and back are these 2 shades. I wish these 2 shades were different. Like this part of the palette I love. These 2 throw me off. There's a gold and like a peachy gold flippy shade, which are pretty, but I know I will never go back to those. Like if I go for this palette from now on, this is just an 8 pan. And for an expensive palette like this, at this price point, I just want to love every single shade I get. And I'm not. And I feel that these 2 just throw the color story off. I think that if you have a warm undertone and you're not into cool tones and you're someone who wants to try cool tone mauves, this palette can be lovely. This is going to be stunning for you. But if you're like me and your preferences are more cool to neutral leaning because you have a cool toned neutral undertone like I do, and this palette is not going to give you, it's just not going to tickle that itch. For me at least it didn't. I ended up liking like these 3 shades a lot, and then this, like that quad with this bronzy shade, and then these to top it off and like add dimension and sparkle. That's what's great about this palette. But those 2, and they're the 2 special shades as well, and those are the ones I don't like. So that's why for me, I'm a little on the fence on this one. Do I love the quality? Hell yeah. Pat McGrath has some really, really stunning eyeshadow quality. But in the end, I just want, like from this, at this price point, I want perfection. And it wasn't my perfect mauve tone palette, which is why it definitely sort of went down a couple of notches. But what was perfection for me are the 2 releases that I bought in 2021, and I sort of pushed back my rosy mauve toned palette ranking video because I wanted to make sure I could try these. I put both of these in like the number 2 and number 1 spot of my ranking, and I said it then and I'm going to say it now again. These could very easily change places depending on how I feel that day. Because these are so new to me and because I have other mauve rosy tone palettes that I've loved for years, I'm still on the fence which of these is truly my number 1 favorite and which one, like, depending on the day, you ask me and I go like, no, the Huda Beauty, no, the Natascha Denona. So for me, currently the most perfect one of the two is the Natascha Denona. That was number 1 in my ranking. And I said it at the time that for me, this color story just came together a little bit better than the Huda Beauty, but I do like both of them for their own reasons. So this one I loved. It's got great Natascha Denona quality. If you love the glam, which I also have, I think that these make for two like perfect companion palettes. If you want this to be more brown toned, more cool toned, pull in the glam if you already own it, or something similarly, of course, because I think the taupey grays that that palette has can nicely like round out this palette. Like the glam, there is a small section here in the bottom with some warmer tones. So if you cover that up, you can just see that everything else is like plummy mauves. And like this taupey shimmer is really, really, really pretty too. And where I was afraid when I first spotted this, I was afraid that these warm tones were going to be too warm. Like with the Tartelette Juicy, I thought this was going to give me like sort of like that sickly look, that it wasn't perfect. But these worked really well. They are more rosy mauves, where these are more plummy, gray, taupey, brown mauves. These are the rosy mauves, because mauves can be very many different things. And I feel that especially like this shade, if like you can still pull this in with some of these cooler tones and it's going to look more cool toned. Another thing I really appreciated about this palette is the shimmer formula. It's got really good different shimmer formulas that allow you to play around with things, add a bit of texture, and that's currently what I'm really, really all about. I love my palettes to have different textures. So not just a matte and a shimmer, but something matte, a shimmer, maybe a duochrome, maybe something that has a bit more sparkle through it. Like, I like layering things and having fun with it. And what made me nervous about trying this palette when I swatched it were the mattes. Some of the mattes in this palette are the creamy matte formula. I believe this one is one, and also this one. And I was like, those are exactly the two shades that I would want to use in my crease as transitions and blending shades. And I was like, if those are going to be crap, I'm not going to love this palette. But that formula really, really surprised me and ended up liking it. It surprised me in a good way, which is why I ended up ranking this higher than I did the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. Let me transition into this, because this surprised me in a not so great way when it came to the shimmer formula in here. So this is what the Rose Quartz looks like. It's very pretty. I love the undertones we get in here. This is, I've said it, I'm gonna say it again, I'm gonna have to play around with it a little bit more, but both of these palettes are my replacements for my Urban Decay Naked 3. Like, that has been like at the top tier list for me ever since it came out. That has been one of my all-time favorite palettes. Whenever I've done all-time favorite palette videos, that palette was in my top 3 together with Naked 2 and the Lorac Pro 3 for years. Like, they were not, like, anything I try, those 3 palettes just weren't knocked down like ever. But now we've got these two and I'm like, yep, those are rosy tone palettes that fit my current aesthetic a lot better. Do I still love my Naked 3? For sure. This, it looks really fun and sparkly and textured and lovely. However, for me, I felt that some of the shades that were like fun sparkles, like especially like the standard shimmer shades in here, just I had trouble picking up and getting them to build up to the intensity to what it looked like in the pan, really. Like, I had to put in quite a lot of work, and for how expensive this is, I don't want to have to be able to put in that much work. So I have other Huda Beauty palettes as well, and there I feel I don't have the same issue, so I think there's a different formula in here in the shimmers, which I don't love. Everything else I love. I even quite enjoyed the Petri dish shade. I used it as a base for one of the duochrome shimmers. I believe it was this one, and it worked really well. So someone gave me that tip, but I wish that the standard shimmers we get in here, which is this purple and these like taupey shades, that those would have worked a little bit better for me. And I also didn't really see a good like bog standard inner corner highlight straight away for me. I felt that was a bit lacking, but I ended up using this shade because if you stick to just the lighter shade of this marbled shade, you can make that work as an inner corner highlight because it does have a bit of like a pinky shift to it. So that worked really well for me. But yeah, I like the mattes. I like the duochromes you get in here. I like sort of like the texture that it has. But the standard shimmer formula in here was what I know Huda Beauty can just do much better. But in terms of what this does, color story wise, the looks I created with this were just really, really pretty. These shadows made me feel amazing. So maybe this just has to grow on me, and then it can knock the Natascha Denona off the top spot for sure. So for me, it's sort of like, do I want sort of like the basics, or do I want to have fun? And that's what these two now have for me. So I think both of them serve a purpose in my makeup collection for sure. So yeah, those were the 10 palettes that I wanted to chat to you about in today's video. Please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know in a comment down below what you think of my thoughts on redoing this format a little bit, sticking only to 10 palettes. It does mean that sometimes, like today, we get very similar brands or very similar color stories as I'm trying things out, because that just means there's a little less variety in these videos. But if I stick to just 10, I may be able to do these more often. So that's sort of like the trade-off. So let me know what you think. Thank you very much for being here today. I hope you have a great one. And if you would like to stick around and support the channel, then I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and come back to see more videos, because I make 3 new videos a week. So hope to see you in my next video, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.